Hello, hello. Welcome back to the P2P Soapbox for our final episode of Season 3. I'm your host and P2P BFF, Marcy Maxwell, and I am thrilled to wrap up this season with another fantastic topic. This season has been incredible. We've covered everything from curating space for emotional healing at our peer-to-peer events to mobilizing the next generation of supporters. I'm really so grateful to all of our amazing guests who've joined us over the past few months and to all of you who have tuned in every other week. Thank you for being a part of our journey. But don't worry, Season 4 is just around the corner, returning in late January. It will be here before we know it. So on this podcast, we've often talked about how peer-to-peer fundraising inherently involves vulnerability. Sharing your personal story and hoping others will respond with support and with their donations. But the truth is, some missions and our connections to them are easier to talk about than others. So what happens when the story that needs to be told is hard to share, especially publicly? What if the cause itself is stigmatized or you're unsure how your loved ones might react? These challenges require a different level of care and strategy from us as peer-to-peer professionals. This week on the P2P Soapbox, I'm joined by Shannon Greene, Vice President of Peer-to-Peer Fundraising at Shatterproof, to dive into these critical questions. With nearly 2 decades of experience in the peer-to-peer world, specifically in the health and research sectors that traditionally dominate our space, Shannon is here to shed light on the unique hurdles that organizations like Shatterproof face in peer-to-peer fundraising. Shatterproof's mission is clear: to ensure no one suffers or dies from substance abuse disorder, a disease that is both preventable and treatable. In our conversation, Shannon shares actionable strategies for overcoming societal biases, creating safe and welcoming event environments, and building trust with donors. She's also highlighting how Shatterproof equips its staff with the tools and confidence needed to build meaningful connections and navigate stigma effectively. Whether your mission carries a stigma or not, there are lessons here for everyone. So let's jump right in with Shatterproof's Shannon Greene. Shannon, welcome to the P2P Soapbox. So happy to have you.
Oh my gosh, Marcy, I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I know I gave our listeners a little bit of an introduction, but tell us a little bit about your personal and professional journey that led you to your still relatively new role at Shatterproof.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I have been in this space for a while, so I recognize that this might be aging myself a little bit, but my journey into fundraising was definitely a unique one. I started post-college with a plan to be a social worker and a plan to affect change in the lives of people who needed support and may have been disenfranchised in some way. And really early on in my career, Marcy, I learned that I needed to see impact. And that is not something you see immediately in the field of social work. So I was really fortunate to make a move within the same organization into a community development role where I was really sourcing dollars and needs for people who were living with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And that was really where I started to find my groove and really started to understand how much I loved working with people, but also helping improve their quality of life. So after getting my hands dirty with community development, moved into a more traditional development role where I was doing corporate development, sponsorship sales, individual giving, major giving. Then I started to touch peer-to-peer events, and I had the amazing opportunity to work for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society for 17 years. And through that experience, really got to do a lot of work in peer-to-peer and for the last 8 years of my career at the Society, had the honor of working on our signature walk program at the Society. And it's really there that I fell in love in the biggest way with peer to peer events, and there was no turning back. Fast forward a little bit to one of my family members having an issue with substance use disorder. I started looking online for resources and came across Shatterproof. And that really sparked my heart and my mind in wanting to do something for the 49 million Americans who are living with substance use disorder. Fortunately, there was also a role available. So here I am now, only 9 months in to this role as Vice President of Peer-to-Peer Fundraising here at Shatterproof.
That's wonderful. So tell us a little bit about if listeners aren't familiar with Shatterproof. So beyond their mission, can you share a little bit about their peer-to-peer portfolio? What is included?
I do want to provide some context because I think it's important. We are a newer organization. We were founded in 2011, so we're new in all things mission related, and that includes peer to peer. So our current portfolio, and I say current because I hope to talk to you again in a few years, and this sounds a little different, but our current portfolio is 6 in-person walk events that take place in top markets across the country. Within our Shatterproof Walk series, we do have a Walk Your Way program that currently has over 1,200 people registered, and they are activating in 48 of the 50 states. So hopefully we'll talk a little more about the opportunities with that. But we also have an endurance program whereby we have charity bibs in the New York City full marathon, the New York City half marathon, and the Marine Corps marathon. And we are continuing to explore expansion opportunities with those. And then lastly, our portfolio includes our Create Your Own fundraising event series, which is essentially our DIY program.
That's great. It's lots of opportunity. I can
Oh my
tell.
gosh,
I can see your
absolutely.
wheels turning. But Shannon, you are kind of joining the Shatterproof team with a really interesting perspective. So having, worked at a large health and research nonprofit, those are the organizations that traditionally dominate peer to peer, right? And I think some of the conversations we've been having around the community have been that nonprofits that are tackling a more stigmatized issue, like the addiction crisis, it's a different, unique challenge when it comes to peer-to-peer, in how you break through some of those, societal stigmas that might be attached to the mission that aren't attached to children's cancer, for
Right,
example, right?
right.
So tell me a little bit about kind of your kind of shift in thinking as you've moved to Shatterproof, but also, how tactically, like how is this changing your thinking about fundraising messages, about communication strategies, about how you tell the story of the mission?
Yeah, absolutely. And wow, is it different? It is different internally and externally. So excited to talk a little bit about what that's starting to look like as I continue to learn more and more about this preventable and treatable disease that is substance use disorder. I think first and foremost, one of my biggest takeaways entering this space with Stigma is the significant need for staff training. Our frontline fundraisers are connecting with thousands of individuals who are coming into this movement who carry significant grief related to the loss of a loved one. They're bringing, hope and inspiration and celebration because they're living in recovery. But there is an overarching theme with stigma. And we know that that stigma itself is contributing to the addiction crisis. So we're really looking at how our events can add really a value proposition to the organization and to our mission around stigma. And mentioned our staff learning and training. That is so critical for us to really understand how can we be a part of using non-stigmatizing language? How can we then carry that forward as we're connecting with sponsors, with participants, with team captains. So we have to be very intentional with our words, with our messaging, to ensure that we are not adding to the stigma that currently exists. I would say another key component for us that I'm really enjoying, in part because I'm new to the organization and we have a new team, but we're really focused on listening to our constituents and conducting listening sessions. What are they feeling? What are they experiencing as it relates to stigma in their workplace, in sharing their own personal journeys and stories? And there's an added benefit to having those listening sessions with our people. We're building trust with them, which is so critical. And we know that that takes so much time to do that. But it's a really important step for us. We're wanting to invite people into being a part of our strategic development as well. We need to understand, for those of us who might not have a lived experience with addiction, really inviting our community members in. And then lastly, a shift for us in this space, because this is a stigmatizing disease, and there's grief and celebration that are coexisting. We're really working with our frontline fundraisers to measure performance, not necessarily on the outcome of revenue, but instead the quality of the outreach. So we are really dependent on our CRM, making sure that we're getting to know our constituents, that we're capturing that information, we're capturing their connection to the mission, and their, connection to this disease. And we're measuring that. So looking at diversifying our outreach. So it's not always about the revenue. It's not always that immediate ROI of how much money, can this individual raise, but instead, from our perspective, how are we reaching out? How often? What are milestones that we can celebrate with people, whether it's their recovery milestone or we're honoring the death of the loved one? That's not necessarily revenue related. That's part of the long game, but we've got to get to know folks. So really starting to shift the narrative for our staff and looking at that outreach. And I cannot say enough about the importance of the CRM in that process so that we can start to really see impact in that way.
Yeah. One of the kind of blessings and curses of peer-to-peer, right, is sometimes not sometimes, we are 2 to 3 steps removed from the donor, right? So it's one thing to think about how do we change our communication strategy to the participant to make them feel comfortable participating, them feel comfortable asking for money, right? Because, we all know there's a vulnerability there, but also then kind of that one step beyond to how do we set our fundraisers up for success when they're making the ask to their potential donors who, again, may not have a personal connection to the mission, or their connection to the person who's asking, that addiction might have been experienced in secret or in private. And so they're coming out with this, there's a coming out story in some ways, I'm sure, similar to, how some of our organizations supporting, like LGBTQ issues might feel. Have you addressed that in any of your kind of that next layer of donor messaging?
We absolutely have, and that was one additional learning that I had when starting here. There are individuals coming in with their very personal story and their very personal lived experience with this, who are not ready to come out and who are not ready to do that. So one of the ways that we've been addressing that is providing them with, and this is a tried and true method, right? But providing them with those impact messaging that is generic, so that they don't have to feel compelled if they're not ready to tell their story. Not everyone is, and that is also okay to do. So I think it's incumbent upon us to create that space and ensure that folks who are not ready to get personal, to come out, so to speak, have information that is shareable and relevant and helps us to accomplish that awareness and education that we need to do with a disease like substance use disorder.
Yeah, I keep thinking about, the anonymity that comes typically surrounding, substance abuse, right? In all of the Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, like it's all about kind of protecting your anonymity. And then you bring them to a very public in-person event, right? So I get that that can be complicated. So when you think about the in-person experience, how is your team creating that welcoming but also safe environment where participants can feel kind of that engaged in the broader community about the cause?
Yeah. Well, I love this question, and something that is really unique about our event audience is that people are coming from such broad spectrums of their experience with this disease. So at our event, and this was really an outcome of listening to our constituents, we asked the questions: why walk? What is this event to you? What does it mean to you? And what do you feel? What do you want to experience? And asking those questions and getting the answers very quickly created our theme. We didn't define it. Staff didn't define this, but our community started to define what our experience started to become, which was people did not want to feel like they were alone. Walk very much was viewed as that open, safe space where they could find their community. So we viewed that as our marching orders. Right? People are telling us that they are looking for a sense of community and that they want to know that they're not alone. And that for us really started to set the stage of how we could create micro experiences within our event, because celebrating recovery looks very, very different from mourning the loss of your 23-year-old son who might have experienced an overdose, right? So we really started to break apart our event footprint so that all people, regardless of their connection to the mission, felt included and safe and a part of a community. So celebrating recovery became celebrating with you. Our memorial area was created so that individuals could honor the loss of a loved one, and it was remembering with you. And then we created an all inclusive space for everyone, regardless of their connection, that we called Together with You, where individuals can write their why, whether that is a person, whether it is the larger mission, and really honor that on a larger wall. And our hope with that, and we just wrapped up our season. It's my first season here, but our hope with that is that we can really create those little micro communities that people feel safe and welcomed and valued in. The other component of our event that I think is really important in creating and holding space and recognizing people's connection to the mission while also amplifying and educating the crisis that we're in is being able to share the personal stories. So we do identify individuals early on in the campaign cycle that are comfortable and excited to share their story and to have that shared. So we do invite 4 people up on stage with us who are connected, whether they live in recovery, they've lost someone, they love someone, or they're a supporter of the mission. We share their personal stories on stage. Again, just demonstrating the different ways that people come in to the movement. So those are some avenues that we've taken in our first year, and we'll continue to listen and evaluate and really learn from our communities what they need, what they need to feel.
Well, and I think it's so applicable to any mission, right? Whether
Right.
there comes with a stigma or not. I often think about, and I know I've mentioned this on this podcast before, I often think about the origin story of the Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure event, where it started as breast cancer was something you did not talk about. And it was something people were very quiet about. And that seems foreign in the,
Yeah.
pink painted world we sometimes live in during the month of
Right.
October. But it became a place for breast cancer survivors and breast cancer people who were diagnosed and living with it to come
Yeah.
together in a space with people who understood what they were going through. And
Yeah.
here we are, flash forward, several decades, and that has become something people proudly wear, to say that this is what I'm living through with surviving. And I think, what you're describing, we could be hopefully not decades away, but, time away. This could be a part of building that level of comfort for people to feel like they can share their story and wear the survivorship as a badge of honor, as opposed to a feeling of shame.
Right. And I absolutely agree. I think we as an organization are on that track. And I think that our ultimate goal is to transform the treatment system, end stigma, and save lives. And our peer-to-peer programming, especially our walk, gives us an avenue to do that, so that people can see themselves and they can see that other people are going through a similar journey. And one of the ways that we help to identify those individuals at the event as well, is it's very simple. Individuals choose a bracelet color that connects them to the mission. And Marcy, I think I was blown away by this. My first Shatterproof walk this season, people didn't have one color; they had multiple. Because they are connected in multiple ways to this mission. But what that starts to do at the event is serve as a conversation starter, because you can see, oh gosh, that person has a teal bracelet. They're living in recovery as well. So it's visible. And I really do believe with any social movement, with any crisis that we've addressed, it starts with sharing and connecting people and sharing those stories of power and resilience and hope. And Walk gives us a platform to do that. So I agree with you, Mercy. I think we are on the precipice of affecting a lot of change so that people can share their stories in public, from classrooms to boardrooms, and everything in between.
So, Shannon, thinking beyond event day, you mentioned donor trust and participant trust and what you're striving to build. What does that look like year round? What steps have you found effective in really kind of building, maintaining that trust with your donors and with your supporters?
Yeah. I love talking about this because in my mind and in my career, event day is just one moment in a 365-day cycle. So we are in it right now. Right. We just wrapped up our events, and my amazing team and I are really focused on building a very intentional year-round cultivation plan that is strongly rooted in getting to know our people. So I talked about listening earlier. What we're doing now is really we're asking for feedback. We're working to understand what motivates them, why they got involved, so that we can treat them like humans, and rather than giving the appearance of monetizing the community. It's important for us to hold space and to take the time and to be okay with taking that time. And I think that all of us kind of, get on these tracks of, all right, we've got to raise this. We have to, acquire so many donors and so many participants. We will get there. And I absolutely believe that we will, but we first have to get to know our people, so that we can understand those critical milestones along their journey, so that we can connect with them, not for the sake of making an ask and getting them to donate or getting them to sign up, but instead we know them. And we want to demonstrate the value that they bring to this movement. So I am so excited for what 2025 is bringing for us as we are crafting out a very strategic year-round cultivation cycle. That also includes informing the rest of our organization, right? So there's a little bit of teaching across the organization of the importance of getting to know, and valuing and appreciating all of our constituents so that we can understand the lifelong journey. Because walk is one day and it is also just one campaign. And I think in all of this process, the personal stories that people share with us are so critically important, because we know the data. We know that 49 million Americans live with substance use disorder. We know that 156 million people know someone. who is personally affected. We know the data, we know the impact, but the personal stories really help us to warm that data up and to make it real and tangible, and it makes it human. So that is a really important part of our strategy and our approach at Shatterproof.
You certainly sound like you've been there more than just 9 months in the way you speak about the mission. Obviously, you've got a long depth of experience just in the world of peer-to-peer. But as I said, so you're still fairly new, going through your first year-round cycle. I always love to hear about kind of what are some of your initial takeaways, right, from your new role? What do you see as the biggest opportunities ahead?
Yeah. I think for us, something that's really important coming into this space, it's a younger nonprofit. I left a very well-established 80-plus-year-old national organization, and coming into a space that is relatively newly formed. We are a founder-led organization, so that that brings a different culture and experience to the work that we're doing. But I really believe that one of our biggest opportunities in front of us is finding that balance and finding the marriage between the value proposition of our events to the organization and the why and the motivation of our constituents. So that to me is really driving a lot of our focus and a lot of our efforts right now. And it's a huge opportunity, to step back and look at our events as being a driver to our mission in a different way. What is the value proposition? What do we need to do for community development and awareness and education? And how can our events help to accomplish that in a really big way? So it's really, we have a big opportunity to mobilize and I think galvanize communities across the country. So I'm super excited about that. I also think that our endurance campaigns offer us something really unique that is different in this space because of the disease. People who are in recovery often turn to physical challenges as a form of therapy. And if you don't mind, I'll share a little personal story with this. I mentioned that we have Charity Bips in the New York City Marathon, which it's an amazing event. I had the opportunity to cheer my wife on this year. It is our family member who is living currently in active use. And running, I am convinced, helped to really save my wife, who was struggling with how to care, how to navigate, how to support someone in active use. And running became her therapy. And more importantly, that community of runners that we have, they're athletes, they're amazing humans. Again, they know someone with substance use disorder, they lost someone, or they're in recovery themselves. It's a smaller group, and the connection and community that these athletes are building really does take my breath away. So I really see for our organization and our mission that endurance events really do present us with a massive opportunity to support individuals who are living their truth and are navigating this space. So talk to me again in a couple of years, and I'll be really excited to share with you some additional races that we are taking part in, because it sure is a win-win situation for so many.
Absolutely. I love that. And I can't wait to see what the next 9 months or however long takes you in your career at Shatterproof, what all you're able to do. So I imagine, Shannon, there might be people listening inspired by the work you're doing, in need of the work that you're doing, whether it's for themselves or their family members. So if people are looking to get involved, where can we send them? We want to put it in our show notes.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. First and foremost, I would recommend that folks visit our primary website, which is shatterproof.org. If you are looking for treatment for yourself or others, would recommend that you visit treatmentatlas.org. And everything is linked on our primary website as well. So definitely recommend visiting and checking that out. You can find all of our events located there as well.
Well, Shannon, thank you so much for opening up this conversation. I have a feeling this is something we've even talked about we might need to be talking about more at our conference, or connecting other organizations who are feeling kind of this same challenge, the same
Absolutely.
stress of how do we do this the right way.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you hopefully in March, but also talking with all of you in the new year on our next season of the P2P Soapbox.
Absolutely. Marcy, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
The P2P Soapbox is produced in partnership with True Story FM, engineering by Pete Wright. Music this week is by Subutan. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, we hope you'll consider doing just that for our show. But the best thing you can do to support the P2P Soapbox is simply to share the show with a friend or colleague. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next season.